Here than Dulles probably, right? But, and you'll see her soon. You'll see her soon. So for her landing safely, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. Oh, that's great. So for FaceTiming family on Shabbat, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. That's great. Didn't we send a trip? We've done it twice. Look at that. So for a trip to the Glenstone, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. Are there any online? Okay, so for laying tefillin at the rally, we say Modim Anachnu Lach, as did Eli. Great. So for spending time with her grandson and family, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. Good timing. For all these gifts, we thank you and we sing your praises and we say Amen. And so as, who was it, Wynn, I think, mentioned, Tuesday, I was at the National Mall for the March for Israel, joined by many congregants, some of whom we were able to meet up with, although it felt like it's like a zombie or horror movie where people kept getting stuck or lost and there was no cell signal. So if someone got lost, we didn't see them again for the rest of the day and kept dropping like flies, but that's okay. Everyone had a good time. But so it was great to be there, joined by staff. All of our staff was there, joined by many congregants, some in our group, some on their own. And if you weren't there, hopefully you joined in spirit. And the rally on Tuesday was powerful and often overwhelming. And there's so many stories of bipartisan cooperation, pretty rare these days, stories of the hostages from their families, stories of why this is so important to Judaism and to America. So many stories. And the idea of a story is exactly how our Parsha begins this week. Parshat Toldot, which talks about Isaac and Rebekah. It's really the only time that's only about them, but also it's really about introducing their sons, Jacob and Esau. But it opens with this, Ve'ela Toldot Yitzchak. These are the Toldot of Isaac, son of Abraham, etc. These are the Toldot of Isaac. So what are Toldot? Now, literally, it often means generations. These are the generations of Isaac, but biblical scholar Nahum Sarna points out that it doesn't really go into the generations. It kind of goes into his opening story and then a story about his sons, and it doesn't lay out the generation after generation like it does elsewhere. So Dr. I think Sarna says that here it's a preface, it's an introduction, and so you could also translate it as, this is the story of Isaac. This is the story of Isaac. So what is Isaac's story? Now, if you have ever seen my senior sermon from rabbinical school, you know that I love Isaac and I love his story. And when I read it, I read that it's a story of heartbreak, right? During the Akedah, if you just read the plain text, his father goes to harm him, and there's a rupture in the relationship between Isaac and Abraham. So there's heartbreak. It's a story of grief. He mourns the loss of his mother. It's a story of lament, of seeing his sons constantly fighting and in contention. And it's also a story of dedication, because the Midrash, the rabbis teach that Isaac willingly offered himself during the Akedah. He was that dedicated. I see so much of Isaac's story in what happened on Tuesday at the rally, because Tuesday was very much about heartache, the heartache of anti-Semitism. It was about grief for the deaths of Israelis and the still kidnapped hostages. It was a story, Tuesday was about lament for what the world has become. And it was also about dedication, because for the most part, Tuesday was peaceful and everyone just went and were able to be there to support. It was a story of dedication because Tuesday showed us that we could be united for a passionate cause. And Tuesday was about one singular story. This is the story of Isaac. This was our story of support for Israel. Now, sure, there was plenty of disagreement. There were multiple subplots that wove together and sometimes clashed. There were people saying things and holding signs that didn't always go together. From where I was standing, I could see one sign in front of me that said, "Thank you, President Biden," which clashed with the two men behind me who critiqued everything a Democrat said up on the stage. There were the J Street protesters who said, "Defeat terror, protect civilians, pursue peace, and end the occupation." And those signs contrasted with the chants for no ceasefire and to bring them home at all costs. And then, of course, there were the decisions I disagreed with. Why did the organizers bring in John Hagee to speak, this man who has said deeply offensive things against Jews and Muslims, and they didn't bring in a single rabbi to speak? Why did the organizers seemingly appease the Orthodox at the expense of liberal Jews by not having a single woman or non-male voice singing during the entire thing? And I definitely didn't agree with everyone when it came to the politics or the military strategy, since after all, I'm definitely not a military strategist. And yet, despite all that, for this one moment in time, it felt as if we had one story to share. We were united. We were united in our support for Israel, the Jewish state, the protector of the Jewish homeland and the Jewish dream for nearly 2,000 years, despite the political disagreements of how it might run. We were united to free the hostages, these innocent children and adults of all ages and backgrounds and so many nationalities, not just Jewish Israelis, but there were Arabs and there were migrant workers all kidnapped that day. And we were united to push back against anti-Semitism. We here at BJC will continue to support these three causes. BJC has taken some steps lately, and there are some that are just coming out to support them. For example, we now have a link on our website to support the Federation's Israel Relief Fund, and I hope you'll offer some contributions to that fund. One of our teens, Dylan Shanker, this is public now, right? Yes. Dylan Shanker will perform, he'll do a fundraiser on December 3rd at 4 p.m. Dylan is going to do a fundraiser for Magen David Adom, so that we can fundraise for people on the ground in Israel. And we have our Blue Ribbon campaign, which will be out back to help support the hostages, right? A blue ribbon for the hostages. And so we have these things, even as we also grapple with all the moral questions that come with this support, right? How do we handle a ceasefire that might save innocent Palestinians and might also harm innocent Israelis? Or how do we not do it when it's reversed? How do we support Israel's right to exist and to self-defense, even as we might also protest what the government has been doing and had been doing up through October 7th? How do we empathize with all innocent lives when there's no clear answer as to how to save them all? And we will continue to support Israel even as we also continue our dialogue with our interfaith partners. Just a few days ago on Sunday, we had our big interfaith service, which was a huge success because we could share our story of shared humanity. And because we could lift up these causes that help innocents on both sides, we'll continue to support World Central Kitchen and New Story leadership. I was proud to co-lead our interfaith service on Sunday, and I was proud to stand there with Israel on Tuesday, even if I didn't have all the answers. Even if there were so many different subplots, because in that moment, we had a shared, united story. May we continue to share that story. May we continue to wrestle with multiple narratives. May we continue to fight back against anti-Semitism and toward freeing the hostages. And may we continue to write the next chapter in our work toward Israel as a safe and secure, democratic state at peace with its neighbors. Amen. Please join me as we rise on page 259 for the prayer for the state of Israel.